We'll talk more about Becky Lynch and what this means for her in due course, but I have to say, she wasn't the person that everyone was talking about after the Elimination Chamber in terms of really shining in that match. Becky Lynch won quite right, predictable and yet good. They can both be true. Mm-hmm. She goes on to face Rhea Ripley at WrestleMania, and yet what a night this was. Not only from the hometown support, well, not hometown, but only from the local support of Perth, but also just in terms of, I mean, we've been banging the drum for her for a long time from her time on NXT, but what a showcase for one Tiffany Stratton.
Aye, a reaction so loud for Tiffany Stratton that if this was old world WWE, they'd be saying Bizarro World, or like, it really is upside down. Like, because she was getting that much of a pop that it felt as if the fans had decided maybe in protest that they were going to try and will Tiffany Stratton over the line, because she was obviously an underdog. It's a bit different now when people come up from NXT. They're not necessarily having to start again. We've seen a little bit more, I don't know, more of a joined up way of thinking with Shawn Michaels and Triple H. If you look at, obviously it wasn't on Elimination Chamber, but Bron Breakker's debut just the day before on SmackDown, the same sort of thing. People are coming up as big deals. It's not that you have to fight your way up from the bottom if you've been NXT champion. Tiffany Stratton was exposed to a portion of the WWE fan base through the feud with Becky Lynch last year in good matches as well, which would have definitely helped her reputation coming up to the main roster. And in terms of, I think, not just because it wasn't a debut, she's been on SmackDown and those matches have shown flashes, but they've also had a couple of things go wrong in them. So it's been a bit unclear what you're getting in Tiffany Stratton. This match couldn't have gone any better for her in terms of getting across the character, but getting across just the physical gifts that she brings. We knew, at least we thought we knew, that she would make use of the environment. So whether or not it was doing something off of the pod or how the prettiest moonsault ever would be folded into it, her like willingness to take risks and perhaps jump onto the crowd of bodies in one of those big spots that you remember from the match. It was some of that, but ultimately I think it was more just how locked in she was and how like she lays it in as well. We've seen this with Tiffany Stratton before. Like her stuff looks some of the stiffest, whilst, you know, touch wood, with the exception of that prettiest moonsault ever on Zelina Vega, I think it was, not necessarily leaving people with war wounds, not leaving people with injuries, which is what you want. You want it to look convincing and look believable without hurting people. It was Nia Jax's cross to bear for years, wasn't it? That, like, there was an injury record that was following her around. So when it looked legit, sometimes it was a little too legit. Here, like the springboard back elbows, no pun intended, spring to mind, as just how much she was laying those in. Like, there have been a lot of gymnastic wrestlers over the years and a lot of people with a gymnastic background that have come into wrestling. I'm thinking of like a Reggie, for example, where just because you can do these amazing flips, it doesn't mean you can necessarily build wrestling into it. So you have to work around that, like Sasha Banks did in that match, or like you have to, you know, wear a gimmick like, say, for example, scripts, just to try and get away with the fact that you're not really competing much.
Yeah, just to make sure that everyone watching... Pay attention, please.
Indeed. Tiffany didn't need that.
No.
You had the flips, you had the gymnastic element to it, but she was laying it in. The punches looked real. The elbows looked real. Every time she grabbed somebody, she looked like she wanted to win. And I can't impress upon people listening or watching how important that is when, as I say, there's nowhere near enough stories being told. So one of the things AEW tends to do really well is make sure the matches tell their own stories. WWE less so. Bell to bell, AEW looks at using a match to not just exist, but work a body part, have a character trait be expressed through the body of the work, and then if in 3 weeks' time you have wrestler A wants to feud with wrestler B, oh, look at the move they've been doing.
Yes.
Look at the body part they've been targeting. WWE doesn't do that as much, but in the women's division you need to, because you're not likely to get much more creative direction. Tiffany Stratton worked so hard, so full on, and so impressively here that I think and because the fans gave her it back. So that Australian crowd, that loud Australian crowd, that loud, incredibly satisfied with the show they were served crowd, gave so much of it back to her that I feel like this was as good a sales pitch as she could put forth to get herself a WrestleMania match.
Yeah, I was going to say, she got eliminated second, and yet she was the one that everyone was talking about, more so arguably than Liv or Bianca or anyone like that. I saw, I believe, our friend Ibu and numerous other people saying, well, off the back of this, she kind of has to win the Money in the Bank briefcase. It works with her gimmick, but also, you know, with the potential she's shown here, makes sense that you basically say she's going to be a world champion within the next 12 months, basically. But yeah, like you say, disregarding all that, you know, you've got a selection of women's matches on the WrestleMania card already. Io and Becky, you got Io and Bayley, you got Becky and Rhea, and you would have assumed a Jade Cargill match, a Bianca Belair match, and then maybe some other match, a showcase or whatever, to try and get as many people on the card. Has Tiffany in this performance done enough to get herself a big WrestleMania match rather than just being, you're on the card, but you're all just kind of shoved in there?
Yeah, like we've talked about tag team turmoils or the Battle Royal or something like that. I think so.
Yeah.
Whether or not it was on the plan beforehand and what we kind of observed about Triple H, like Triple H's booking pattern is, for the most part, he will try as hard as he can to stick to a plan, and Christ, doesn't it get chaotic when he can't. So if she wasn't on the docket, the one thing working against her might just be, well, we've kind of decided it now. You know, like on a game show where, say, you want to lock in that answer. Like Triple H doesn't have to lock in his WrestleMania card. Not all of it anyway, the big matches. I feel like you leave gaps for performances like this. I was watching Bianca Belair and Tiffany Stratton lob bombs at each other and think, yeah, I'll have that. I was watching Liv Morgan with some of the best improvisational work I've seen from her ever.
Yeah.
Just embracing being a heel because she knew that the fans were so behind Tiffany Stratton that when that finish came, she must have been thinking in there, they're going to hate me for this. They're going to absolutely hate me. Lean in. And she was giving it all that. Like, she was finding cameras to do that. And knowing that she was going to get booed for the remainder of the match, and she was going right the way to the finish, she then just started healing up the rest of her performance because she's thinking, well, hang on, I'm already going to get booed because I pinned Tiffany. I'm now in there against Bianca and Becky. I'm the heel. So she just like dove right in. And I think some of that was born out of her interactions with Tiffany Stratton. I think I've got issues with the way that Naomi was handled, and I've had issues with kind of how they've handled her since she came back. But I think Tiffany Stratton managed to outshine Naomi from like an athletic point of view. And that's one of Naomi's calling cards, right? Yes. It's how athletic she is. Tiffany took that. So there's Naomi, Liv, and Bianca from this match alone that Tiffany Stratton could work a singles match with. And I know when you've had months of Survivor Series and the Royal Rumble to start, like you've joked about it, 6 different WrestleMania cards full of all massive all-star matches. In reality, if you look back through, 39 years now, there are always matches that you look at the WrestleMania card 6 months later and be like, what was that doing on there? They're not quite the memorable main events that have been built since the Rumble. They're not things that you would necessarily think to feature on the poster, but they're quite good on the night. I'm thinking of when did we see, was it in Dallas, American Alpha versus the Street Profits? Alpha Academy versus Street Profits, or something like just a nice tag team match that was a bit of fun. It existed, I think, to get Gable Steveson on the card, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, yeah.
But fairly nondescript stuff. And there's better examples than that historically. Tiffany Stratton, in the form she's in, getting given our WrestleMania match, whether it be a short one, whether it be something you build up over 5 weeks left of television. I don't think it's out the realms of possibility, and it bodes well for Triple H, especially in the women's division. And I keep using that as a caveat because it's not a well-booked division. If you can simply present the idea, the veneer of a meritocracy, even if there isn't one. If you can tell your wrestlers, look, I know you don't get as much TV time, I know you don't get as many stories, but if your work speaks for itself, you will get rewarded. And I always think that's how, when you've got nothing creatively for wrestlers, that's the way you kind of fit them in. I would love her to get a spot.